Sinkholes. They can be sudden, catastrophic, and deadly.
Opened the door, and there was no floor there. Everything was gone. I swear I could hear him hollering for me, cheer me out, mate.
And the numbers are rising all over the world, even in Britain.
Man just said, there's a sinkhole in your back garden, you've got to leave, you've got to evacuate. You've got 15 minutes to pack a bag and go.
With holes hitting the headlines.
When they did finally get to the bottom of the hole, it was 80 feet deep.
Time and time again. But some places suffer more sinkholes than others. This is what it's like to live in a sinkhole hotspot.
You're actually seeing people's whole lives really floating on the surface. Can't help but feel for people that are going through that.
On the night of the 9th of November 2016, Ripon Fire Service's Blue Watch was called out to an emergency. Something was wrong on Magdalene's Road. Doreen Ellis was one of the first to get a knock on the door.
We were in bed, asleep, and there was a big knocking on the front door.
Hi, sorry to disturb you. We've been called out to a sinkhole around the back.
Man just said, there's a sinkhole in your back garden, you've got to evacuate. You've got 15 minutes to pack a bag and go.
This is the colossal damage of a sinkhole which swallowed up gardens on Magdalene's Road in Ripon late on Wednesday night.
The ground had opened up beneath 4 gardens. The hole was 30 feet deep and big enough to swallow a tennis court. Peter Lister and Julia Osler were away when the sinkhole struck, so the first they knew about it was when they saw it on TV.
We came up to the property to find the police, the fire brigade, the road blocked off because the sinkhole was still moving.
I was shocked. It was bigger than what I expected it to be.
4 homes were perilously close to the edge of the sinkhole, and no one knew how much closer the hole might get.
All the garden next door was a wildlife garden, and she lost all of that.
One of the garages had fallen in, several of the outhouses had fallen in, the trees, the bushes, the fences all fell into it.
The woman that lived up there was very lucky to be alive. She came out of her back garden, went down the step.
I put one foot down and then I realised that the steps were moving. I turned round and grabbed hold of a pole, pulled myself back up and went quickly back into the house.
I think she's the luckiest woman alive. I've never known anyone come so close.
10 houses on Magdalene's Road were quickly evacuated, but the hole was still growing.
After about the second or third day, we started getting concentric rings, which actually went all the way up to the corner there, where the bin is there, but started growing and growing as days went by, and growing and growing.
With the cracks spreading, many residents feared the worst. This was the kind of thing they'd normally see on television.
You can see gravel, dirt, and roots inside this perfectly symmetrical sinkhole.
Happening in another part of the world. Stories of holes opening up in faraway places, swallowing people, cars, and buildings.
The building was collapsing around us. Our room itself is over 100 feet underground.
Now Ripon was in the news, and for the second time in 2 years. Because in 2014, another hole had opened up just around the corner in Magdalene's Close. And that one split a house in 2.
Last night, a 25-foot sinkhole opened up under this home in North Yorkshire, and there was no time to stand and watch.
It actually started crumbling away. I could hear it crumbling away above my head. It was just creaking and cracking and crumbling. And
the couple living here were lucky, because this hole sank slowly, giving them time to get out. But when sinkholes collapse suddenly under houses, the results can be deadly. Florida is the sinkhole capital of the world, and Seffner in Hillsborough County lies right in the middle of so-called Sinkhole Alley, a place that's notorious for one of the most shocking sinkhole disasters of recent times. February the 28th, 2013, was an ordinary day in this quiet town near Tampa. Jeremy Bush had just returned home from work.
Went in my room, started eating, and heard this loud noise. Sounded like a train or a car or something just hit the house.
The sound Jeremy had heard was the concrete floor of his brother's bedroom collapsing.
I ran towards my brother's room, opened the door, and there was no floor there. Everything was gone.
Jeremy's wife, Rachel, and her aunt, Janelle Wicker, were also in the house.
We heard him screaming, "Help," and we ran out down the hallway.
A sinkhole had swallowed everything in the room, including 37-year-old Jeff Bush.
All you could smell in the house was like fresh dirt. Everything was just like churning on top of it.
I jumped in the hall. Swear I could hear him hollering for me. Jeremy, help me. I was digging with my hands. There wasn't nothing I could do.
As Jeremy tried to save his brother, Rachel dialed 911.
We need an ambulance and the cop buddy stuck underneath the house. The house just fell through.
Okay, and what happened to the house?
The bedroom floor just collapsed and my brother-in-law is in there and he's underneath the house.
The emergency services arrived within minutes, but time was running out for Jeff. With the hole expanding, a police officer pulled Jeremy from the room.
As I'm getting out of the hole's collapsing. There was nothing I could do.
The police and fire crews brought in specialist equipment to search for Jeff Bush and try to save him. All the family could do now was watch and wait.
What happened to the house?
The bedroom floor just collapsed and my brother-in-law is in there and he's underneath the house.
This 911 call was made moments after 37-year-old Jeff Bush was swallowed by a sinkhole. The hole had ripped open right underneath his bedroom. In a final attempt to locate Jeff and pull him out, the police sent in specialist equipment, while Jeff's brother Jeremy watched on with his wife, Rachel, and her aunt, Janelle.
The hole opened up and took their equipment down, the camera and everything. So then everything stopped because the hole was still growing. Nobody did anything. No one really even tried to rescue my brother with me. He's still down there.
The memory of Jeff's death is hard to live with. But they also live with the knowledge that things could have been even worse.
2 months prior to this, my daughter was in that room. So it could have been all of us at one point and not just him.
Yeah.
The house was later demolished, along with 2 houses on either side. Now there is nothing but fenced-off wasteland. A wasteland that hides the sinkhole that swallowed Jeff Bush and buried him alive.
That is my brother's last resting place. I come out here on his anniversary when it happened. I come out here on his birthday. It's hard, but I do it, man. 'Cause I love him. I want him to know that I tried everything I could to get him out. Do everything I could.
Florida is full of holes, with new ones appearing every week. So in this part of the world, a sinkhole expert is always busy. David Wilshaw is a British geologist living in Florida. In the 13 years he's been here, he's worked on more than 1,000 sinkhole cases.
Well, if you want to see a great example of a sinkhole here in Florida, the Devil's Millhopper Geologic State Park is a place to come, because here we have a monster of a sinkhole. It's 500 feet across, 120 feet deep.
The Devil's Millhopper gets its name from the gruesome remains that can be found here, because when this ancient sinkhole formed, it filled with the fossils of strange beasts and creatures.
When early explorers came down here, they found this millhopper-shaped hole in the ground, and at the bottom of it was a bunch of bones and teeth, particularly sharks' teeth. We had a lot of saber-toothed cats, mastodons, things of that nature. And those bones all washed down to the bottom here, where the devil had been doing his evil work, and these are the remains of poor creatures that lived in the past, and they were subjected to the devil's torment. This is kind of like the river Styx, if you like, the pond at the bottom, which is always present.
The boulders at the bottom of Devil's Millhopper are made of limestone, the rock that lies beneath the whole of Florida. It's a hard rock, but it dissolves in acidic rainwater. Over time, water flowing through the cracks eventually forms caverns underground. And when a cavern can no longer bear the weight of the rock and soil above, it collapses and forms a sinkhole.
This is not by any means the largest sinkhole in Florida. There have been historically enormous sinkholes. Some of the very large lakes we see in Florida are extremely large, miles across almost, so they can vary in scale. And the scale depends upon how big the hole in the rock is into which the soil can move. If it's a big enough hole and it can take enough of the soil that sits above it, then you're going to get a very large sinkhole.
Ripon, in North Yorkshire, has the same kind of rock problems as Florida. So all around there are signs of sinkholes past.
If you look to the left, you can see in the field there's some depressions which, when you look at the mapping, relate to historic events.
Ian Spears is Harrogate Borough Council's emergency planner, one of the first people on the scene for the sinkholes in 2016 and 2014.
Coming up on the right, we've got the entrance into the old auction mart, and that's where the property was seated that had the issues in Magdalene's Close in 2014.
That sinkhole formed beneath this house. It was 36 feet wide and 50 feet long, and it ripped the house apart as the occupiers fled.
That was just up here. You can see now that the building was demolished, and thankfully none of the other properties were affected. But the chap had left his dog in the house when he'd come out, so the big concern was whether it's safe to get the dog out.
The residents had managed to escape, but there was a problem. Blue Watch manager Kenny Beck took the decision to go back inside and rescue the dog.
Well, as we went in, you could see undulations in the ground, cracks appearing in the ground, and the greenhouse had started to fall in on itself. So it was a quick dash in, grab the dog, quick dash out, and then cordon off the area and evacuate all the immediate vicinity.
Today, the land where the house once stood is part of a large field close to Ripon city centre, land that would normally be ripe for development. But just 1 week before the house-cracking sinkhole, plans to build 75 new homes here were rejected for fear of what lies beneath. Geologist Dr. Anthony Cooper is the leading expert on what lies beneath Ripon. He's been studying the area for 40 years and drawn up a detailed sinkhole map of the city.
Those ones that are quite recent also have other ones near them that have occurred in the 70s and 80s, so the area is pretty well riddled with sinkholes.
This part of Yorkshire is a sinkhole hotspot, with the British Geological Survey rating it one of the UK's most susceptible areas for sinkholes.
These sinkholes, a lot of them are in lines, and those lines relate to the pattern of caves that have formed under Ripon and are continuing to get larger and subsequently collapse.
So what causes the caves under Ripon, and why do these caves create such dramatic sinkholes? The answer is found on the banks of the River Yore. Just like Florida, this part of Yorkshire is built on rock that dissolves in acidic rainwater. But while Florida has limestone, Ripon has gypsum.
Gypsum dissolves about 1,000 times faster than limestone. This has come off the gypsum cliff behind us and just been carried across by the river. It shows the typical dissolution effects that you get of water flowing over a soluble rock. If I put this rock in the river, it would only last a matter of about 3 weeks before it dissolved away completely.
When that dissolving process happens underground, it can create caverns. And when a gypsum cavern collapses, it can be sudden and shocking.
Well, we're just standing next to a sinkhole that occurred suddenly in 1939. It's about 18 metres across and 9 metres deep. There was no trace of it here before, and the gamekeeper who was in the wood at the time came out very fast when this suddenly appeared. If this sort of collapse occurred under a house, it would be catastrophic.
In Magdalene's Road, the sinkhole of 2016 swallowed garages and sheds, but stopped just short of the houses. But now the residents had another ordeal to get through. Months of uncertainty until their gardens were repaired and their homes were safe to return to.
We could see from our windows exactly what was going on and how it progressed from putting in the initial concrete, then putting in tons and tons and tons of normal concrete on top of it, and then tons and tons and tons of rock went on top as well.
Watching the work, it seems so slow and laborious, but they could only do so much at a time, apparently. They had to fill it, then leave it, settle it, check it, measure it, and then come back and do it all over again. 4 to 6 months it took them to get all that done.
The repair work also included sensors that monitor movement of the land below. But now the residents need to know for certain that the ground all around is as solid as it looks.
Whether it's good news or bad news, we need to know.
We don't want it to happen in our own backyard again, but obviously it is going to happen again in Ripon because Ripon's a sinkhole area.
Ripon is a city with a history of sinkholes, but it's by no means the only one.
After the rain and the floods, it seems the latest curse of Britain's wet weather is the sinkhole.
There have been 6 reported cases already this year, and part of the central reservation gave way along the M2 last week.
More and more sinkholes have been appearing across the UK, causing havoc and mayhem for homeowners and motorists all over the land.
In High Wycombe, a car on a driveway was swallowed up and buried.
And hitting the headlines like never before.
Our daughter Zoe was in absolute hysterics, having realised that her car had disappeared into a hole.
Many of those holes appeared in the chalky land of the southeast of England, with one of the biggest holes opening up in the Hertfordshire town of Hemel Hempstead. The hole was 35 feet wide and 20 feet deep, a sudden and shocking development for local resident Martin Boter.
We were woken up at 7:30 in the morning by a policeman saying that we need to get ready, we need to evacuate you very quickly.
It goes right under the road and goes right under the house, so it's clearly very dangerous at this moment in time.
He proceeded to tell us there's a sinkhole that's opened up at the end of our road and we need to evacuate you due to the fact that there's a possible gas leak and potential explosion. It looked like a serial murder scene because you sort of had police officers putting up tape. The sinkhole had taken out all the electrics, the water, the gas that stopped the supply to all their houses. They then found another void. There was thoughts that there could be a void under my house. There were thoughts of void under the neighbour's house, and all sorts of things started to sort of go through everyone's mind.
It was a nightmare scenario for everyone on the street. With no power and no heating in the middle of February, and with the hole sinking and the danger rising, the police evacuated 48 households.
You've got the wife in tears and the kids in tears, and all we want to do is just get into a bed.
Martin was told that the disruption to his family's life would last for about a week. But that week of uncertainty turned into months and months of chaos.
In the space of 9 months, we had moved 11 times.
The building closest to the hole had to be demolished and rebuilt. So when the Boter family returned to their house, they faced another 2 years of disruption.
The experience didn't stop as we moved into the door. There was still that bit afterwards where they was demolishing the house and rebuilding the house, and the driveway in and out of the cul-de-sac was relaid and dug up and relaid and dug up and relaid. When we moved back home, my son, he sort of had these pieces of tissue on the carpet. And I said, Carter, what is that? And he said, no, I'm playing Sinkholes, Daddy. And that to me was a telling memory in terms of not many kids would sort of grow up wanting to play sinkholes, you know.
With the sinkhole eventually filled in and the buildings and road repaired, life in Oatridge Gardens is now back to normal. But in 2017, just around the corner, a second sinkhole opened up, closing another Hemel Hempstead road for months. Because with sinkholes, lightning can strike twice in the same place. 2 years after the Florida sinkhole that killed Jeff Bush, the land here opened up a second time.
Daylight revealed a painful reminder for neighbors. The very same sinkhole that took the life of Jeffrey Bush in February 2013 collapsed again.
It's been filled twice or 3 times with gravel already, and it still looks like it's gone down more.
Tragedies like the death of Jeff Bush are a shocking reminder to Floridians of the dangers that lurk beneath the surface here. Because sinkholes in Florida are a fact of life, with hundreds opening up every year. So what's it like to see a huge sinkhole rip through your neighborhood?
All of a sudden, a little hole grows into a giant hole. A home gets taken, a second home gets taken. Then all of a sudden, the back property is affected. You know, within a minute, you're in the middle of a worldwide story.
And what happens when a double-decker bus meets a sinkhole?
It did fracture the gas main. One spark would have done it.
On the 3rd of March 1988, bus driver Jim Peitling set off for what he thought would be another normal day in Norfolk. In fact, he was about to park Norwich smack bang in the middle of the sinkhole map of the world.
I was on a normal day's work and it turned into an extraordinary day's work, really. I was on my last run of the day. I had let a Ready Creek lorry go past me about 15 to 20 yards past the bus stop. The bus stopped. There was a terrible grating noise of metal against something, and I didn't know what it was. When I looked out at the back of the bus, there wasn't any road around the back wheels.
Jim got his passengers off as quickly as he could, and it was just as well. Because the bus was sinking fast.
The bus was just about 2 to 3 feet off of the ground. It was held in that position by a gas main, but once the gas main fractured, it suddenly finished up in the final position, like that.
Suddenly, Norwich was headline news. And all because a burst water main triggered the collapse of an old chalk tunnel beneath the road, creating the sinkhole that was eating Jim's bus.
We just heard there is quite a gas leak, apparently. Yes, and I would like to get away from the interview to be able to see what it's all about.
We were very, very fortunate. There wasn't an explosion.
And thank goodness you had no smoking signs on the bus.
Oh, absolutely. One spark would have done it. So we were very, very fortunate.
Luckily, the bus didn't terminate here. It was hoisted out, repaired, and Jim drove it many times afterwards.
City centre, please.
30 people. Thank you very much.
And for a while, he was the most popular man in Norwich, at least among his workmates.
Shortly after the bus went down the hole, Cadbury's put an advert in the paper with the slogan, "Nothing fills a hole like a double-decker." And they did send some double-decker bars to all of the lads on the buses in Norwich. So, yeah, everybody did get a double-decker bar out of it anyway.
Even though the internet didn't exist back in 1988, that picture of the bus in the sinkhole went viral.
That image is the thing that has actually sold the story, I'm sure it has. It went round the world. Whether my name went with it to everywhere, I don't know, but I'm certainly quite well known in Norwich.
A vehicle-munching sinkhole that did go viral on the internet was this one in Kentucky in 2014. It didn't open up in a road, it opened up in a museum. And it didn't swallow a bus, it swallowed 8 classic Chevrolet Corvettes. The hole destroyed around $1 million worth of collectible cars. But this nightmare at the museum took an unexpected turn. The sinkhole was a big attraction. The museum doubled its visitors as more and more people came to see the hole and the crazy car crash it had caused.
It was beyond anything I'd expected, just the size and I guess the depth of it.
While many sinkholes are big enough to swallow cars, sinkholes that can swallow a house or two are rare, even in Florida. But in 2017, that's exactly what happened here, back in so-called Sinkhole Alley at Land O'Lakes, Pasco County, just north of Tampa.
There's a sinkhole right next to our neighbor's house, and it's literally eating the house.
When the 911 call came through, Kevin Guthrie coordinated the emergency response to one of the biggest sinkholes this county had seen for decades.
On July the 14th at about 7:30 in the morning, we received a 911 call saying that the ground was opening up at the residence there on Ocean Pines Drive.
With the groundwater level so high, the hole quickly filled with water. Local resident Terrence Dewan watched his neighbors' houses crumble into it.
It grew like this, and then it started doing this. The ground started dropping like piano keys.
Within about an hour, what started out as about a 10-foot sinkhole ended up opening up to almost 150 feet.
And it moved over to that side of the house. You know, at that point, you knew that they were in danger.
The first home was completely engulfed into the sinkhole within a matter of about 25-30 minutes.
And then it moved this way, and you knew that that house was going to be in danger.
The second home, about 40% of it was engulfed in the same time frame, eventually engulfing probably 60 to 70% within 2 hours.
And then once it had moved side to side, then it started moving forward towards us. That's when my blood pressure started to rise.
On the other side of the sinkhole, Ralph Hartwig's family home was getting closer and closer to the edge.
2 police cars parked in my cul-de-sac. They pounded on my door and told me that I had to leave. I watched the second half of the second house fall into the sinkhole over the deputy's shoulder, so they didn't have to ask me twice.
Once our mailbox went, then we knew that we were in a hot spot, you know.
By the time it finally come to rest at about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, ended up being almost 250 feet wide by about 50 feet deep.
Ocean Pines Drive was now ground zero for Florida's latest sinkhole disaster. And yet, just a few hours earlier, it had been a neighborhood that typified the Florida dream. The same dream that brought British geologist David Wilshaw to live in the Sunshine State, even though he knows more than most about the dangers of sinkholes.
As we come around the side of this property, you'll see why they built this neighborhood the way they did. You've got your boat dock, you can take your boat out, you can canoe. There are some bigger lakes around here you could water ski on. That is the typical Florida lifestyle that everybody dreams of, but it comes at a price.
For the residents here, this dream had become a nightmare. The sinkhole had swallowed 2 houses completely, and 9 more were left teetering on the edge, condemned and earmarked for destruction with a red tag.
It looks like a construction site, which it has been for the last month or so. The first thing they had to do was remove the material which was in the hole. So there was parts of houses, a couple of boats, and there were septic tanks. So to avoid polluting the local lake, they've impounded the area where the sinkhole occurred. Basically, they filled it in with crushed limestone and then built a dam around the edge of the sinkhole lake, which is now formed.
For Terrence Dewan, the filling in work didn't save his home. The property has been condemned as too dangerous to live in.
Be careful. You can see this is the concrete line where the hole was on the driveway, because this was my driveway that went out, 40 feet, and it's in the hole. I mean, it stinks through no fault of your own. Your property is pretty much not livable, and at the end of the day, we're not going to be living here again.
Back in Ripon, it's 9 months since the sinkhole that swallowed 4 gardens, and local residents are now putting their lives back together. Peter Osler and Julia Lister bought their house here as an investment, to do up and sell and give them both a pension. So a sudden sinkhole definitely wasn't part of the plan.
This was just a little cupboard here, which we've then made into an ensuite. We've totally rewired it, we've totally replumbed it, we've re-insulated it all.
We haven't shirked on anything.
With so much time and money tied up inside the house, they need to know that this part of Ripon is back on solid ground. When the sinkhole swallowed the gardens here, Harrogate Borough Council called in the British Geological Survey straight away. Their measurements of the size and depth of the sinkhole were crucial to working out how to fill the voids below and stabilise the land above. Now, Dr. Oliver Kouros and his team are back to take a form of geological X-ray of what lies beneath.
So what we're doing here today is we're running a microgravity survey, and that involves using a gravimeter. We're essentially taking images off the subsurface, much like a medical doctor would take images of a patient's body to try and understand what's going on inside.
To ensure that a sinkhole doesn't strike twice, it's vital to fill all the open spaces beneath. In Sefner, the hole that killed Jeff Bush was filled with gravel, and all of it disappeared just 2 years later. But filling holes is expensive, so in Florida, many are left to become lakes. And in Ripon, historic sinkholes have become landmarks, especially the 1834 sinkhole that may have inspired one of the world's best-loved children's books. Alice in Wonderland is the story of a girl falling into a rabbit hole and entering a magical world underground. The man who wrote it was Lewis Carroll, a regular visitor to Ripon because his father was a clergyman at the cathedral. When you combine the quirkiness of Ripon Cathedral with the drama of the city's sinkholes, you have the makings of a fantastic story. So did Alice fall down a rabbit hole or a sinkhole? Geologist Anthony Cooper claims the answer lies right here, behind this clump of trees.
When you get a bit closer, you find to your surprise that there is in fact a 20-metre drop down a hole with red sandstone exposed in the back of it there. It's about 11 metres across, it's about 20 metres deep.
This hole is close to the city's old railway station, so Lewis Carroll would have passed it many times.
I think there's a strong connection between Alice going down, 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 not a rabbit hole, but a sinkhole. But you can't say in a children's book, Alice went down a sinkhole, and they probably didn't even have a name for it then.
Lewis Carroll isn't the only person to take inspiration from Ripon's sinkholes. Just across the river at Ripon Golf Club, sinkholes are a feature of the course. They call them bomb holes here. And according to club member Anthony Blackburn, the players love them because they're an ever-changing challenge.
The area that has got the sort of shrubbery in it, that is one of the biggest sinkholes on the course, that one. It looks pretty flat here, but then all of a sudden, just over the brow of the hill, you've got this huge bomb hole which just appears. You've really got to carry this with your drive if you're going to get a chance to either make birdie or par on this hole.
Every one of the first 9 holes here is peppered with sinkhole craters and land that seems to dip a little more with each passing season.
As we come further up the 4th fairway, you can see quite a significant indentation here on the left-hand side. This has gone from being a completely flat green to one that, I suppose, slopes quite severely from back to front. It slopes so much that during the summer months in particular, the green staff cannot put the pin anywhere near the middle or front of the green because it's so fast and downhill that the ball just keeps on rolling off the green and it's virtually impossible to stop it.
Although, on the plus side, get your shot wrong and there's a good chance you'll get a sinkhole in one.
One of the things that really amazes me when I play with visitors is they come to places like this and they go, wow, look at that. I didn't know that was there. Isn't that amazing? And it's interesting that they love the quirkiness of this front 9 holes of golf, and often it is because of the features from the gypsum. Sinkholes, really. The missing of that putt had nothing to do with the gypsum.
Perhaps it's no coincidence that Florida has more sinkholes and more golf courses than any other US state. Most of the water features and lakes here are sinkholes, including the one in Land O'Lakes, Pasco County, that struck so shockingly in 2017.
The property is condemned. If you feel the ground shake, I'd start running.
Rolf Hartwig, his wife and baby son were all in their house when the sinkhole struck. As the hole swallowed the house next door, they had seconds to get out.
Usually it would be mowed.
So this was where you hoped your son would grow up and play and kick a ball?
This would be where my son would play, to use the British term, football, but soccer or otherwise, so. And gigantic pool to swim in.
And so what do you think will happen to this house now?
The county's probably going to knock it down and make a park out of it. Who knows?
All Rolf can do now is think about everything the sinkhole has taken from him.
How do you feel to be standing in the garden here looking at it?
You would have to censor that.
On the other side of the newly formed lake, Terence Dewan is stepping back into his condemned home for one last look around.
All right, so where we at right now, obviously we're in the kitchen. We've removed all of our things. This was the nice granite and new counters and cabinets that we had put in. We had all new appliances that we bought. If you're not careful, you'll trip over some of those right there. Normally that water would have drained off, and instead, you know, seems to be pitching inward, and you can kind of see the water signs there. We got a boat. We live on a lake. It was one of those things. Waited a couple years, save up some money, get the boat, live on a lake, have fun, and then it's just kind of gone.
One of the cruelest things about a sinkhole is the speed at which it can take so much away. All your hopes, dreams, and plans sunk in a matter of moments.
Usually it happens on TV and it's somewhere else, you know, and you're watching other people deal with the tragedies and the things that, you know, that go on when holes like this open up. Of course, this hole's a little bit different. You don't see holes like this opening up every day. You don't see a big hole open up and basically swallow two homes.
Back on the other side of Ocean Pines Drive, Rolf may have lost his home, but he's staying positive. He believes, despite everything, he's a lucky man.
Now, when I tell you that I'm a fortunate individual, that's why.
His wife Soleil and son Henry got safely out of the house.
So you may be looking for a new home, but you're both safe, and your son is safe too.
Yeah, we're very lucky, aren't we?
So can anything be done to prevent devastating sinkholes like this?
This is probably the most documented sinkhole in history.
And what lessons can sinkholes teach us?
Buildings have to be designed to a higher level of safety to allow for a future sinkhole collapse.
I ask that everybody out there, please pray for the people in this community right now. They're fearful. And unfortunately, we can't give clear answers because this is Mother Nature.
When the Land O'Lakes sinkhole made the news all over the world in 2017, one expert realized it was happening very close to home.
Because I grew up right near here, I was very interested right away and understanding right away where they were talking about.
Dr. Laurie Collins is a geoscience professor from the nearby University of South Florida. So this was a perfect opportunity to study a sinkhole from beginning to end. Using the same kind of technology that the British Geological Survey have been using in Ripon, Dr. Collins and her team assembled a 3D picture of the surface here and what lies beneath.
This is probably the most documented sinkhole in history. We're going to be making all of these data sets freely available so that we can really see, understand, and share the science related to this site.
Their research shows that this entire area used to be a lake, and that lake was an ancient sinkhole. By sharing this information with experts like David Wilshaw, Dr. Collins hopes that disasters like this can be avoided, with a much better understanding of how and where to build houses in the future.
Well, this is great to have an actual kind of 3D image of a sinkhole. That is something we rarely get.
What we have been able to show is that there's been dredging of the Lake Saxon area that essentially took all the dredge material and made new land.
Okay.
So most of what we're seeing through here is that are actually houses sitting on new land or changed land surface.
Right.
The problem for Florida is that its population is growing all the time, and properties are being built on new land all over the state. That's why sinkhole reports are rising year on year, because more and more people are living right on top of them. Jeremy Bush and his family are still struggling to make sense of a sinkhole collapsing right under their house, swallowing and killing Jeff Bush. With their house destroyed, Jeremy and Rachel now live in a mobile home. Their lives changed forever by a sinkhole.
Life's different. Going from living into a house to living into a trailer. I still have worries here because I got to worry about that tree above my trailer now.
There's always something, I suppose, to worry about.
It's always something. No one ever said life was easy.
Back in Ripon, the latest plan for the land where the 2014 sinkhole happened is to put caravans here instead of houses. But Ross Nicholson is a geotechnical engineer who's been studying this land in detail and believes even caravans could be unsafe here.
If you can imagine a situation where perhaps in late January during the night, in a heavy downpour or heavy snowfall, one of the caravans subsides into a large hole of 5 meters depth with elderly people inside it, how are they going to escape?
And as for building new houses in Ripon, Ross says lessons should be learned from the sinkholes here and in other sinkhole hotspots all over the world.
So even if there are no sinkhole features present now, they could appear in 40 or 60 years and change the safety of a site completely. So buildings that are built on gypsum-prone areas of Ripon have to be designed to a higher level of safety. If I was a family man with a young family living in Ripon, I would like to know what's beneath my feet. But I can also understand why people would prefer not to know.
Back in Magdalene's Road, Peter Osler and Julia Lister know a lot more about what's beneath their feet than they did before the sinkhole in 2016.
The main worry was the unknown. And as time has gone on, you know, the geological guys have come along, you know, and explained things to us. So it's not frightening anymore.
The British Geological Survey will continue to monitor the land here to assess any remaining risk. But there's no sign of imminent subsidence or cracking. And the concrete plug that filled the hole appears to be doing exactly what it's designed to do. On top of that, most residents think the area looks better than it did before the sinkhole.
What you see today is absolutely fantastic. It's brightened the whole area. We've got a brand new road surface out of it as well.
We're the ones that are letting the side down at the moment because we're still renovating. So, sorry neighbours.
Doreen Ellis too is confident that her sinkhole misadventure is over and that her house and garden are now firmly on solid ground.
We're apparently 99% sure that you don't get two in the same place. We know that other parts of Ripon, it could happen there. But once you've had one, you're not going to get another one, so it's probably the safest place to live, on top of a sinkhole.